Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the video. Today I wanted to talk about understanding a little bit more about the narcissist and demon possession. There have been these texts that were found, I think it was like in the 1800s. They were called the Nagamati texts. But when it describes these demonic beings from the time that they lived or whatever, they were called the archons. And it describes them a little bit. And so I kind of wanted to go over it because there was somebody that spoke on these things. And it was very interesting because it really sounds a lot like the narcissist. And he would talk about how in different parts of the world, you would have these entities. They would be just named differently. And it makes me think of when Babylon was dispersed, right? You had different languages. So all the people went in different directions and that spoke different languages. And it's kind of like whenever they would describe Nimrod, they each had a different name for him because they spoke different languages and they were describing the same individual. And he had different names. So if you put all these names together from all these different countries that would describe Nimrod at that time, it would be the same individual they're describing, but he may have had like 20 different names. Like Gilgamesh was Nimrod, people believe. So these are things that kind of can trick you up, especially over years and years and years. But nevertheless, I wanted to talk about that, and I also wanted to talk about these individuals. They talk about being these cut out copies or cardboard copies or soulless portals or empty cedars. There's a lot of different names, and it was from somebody had posted this article in like 2009, montauk.net or something like that. But they had done these studies where they had talked to a lot of individuals and they don't have any inner voice. You know, you can talk to people, but then when you're by yourself, right, you can have a conversation with yourself without saying anything, so to speak. It makes you think of the narcissist because in the situation with the narcissist, so they're basically all body. In the case of something like this, they would be all body and there's no like spirit man, or I guess your inner soul, inner voice. So, you know how, I don't know, I do this sometimes where I may have a to-do list for today and I have it on paper or something, but sometimes I'll be hashing it out in my head, you know, like how is the best way to handle this, or I got that done, now I need to get this done. And, you know, I could have that conversation with my inner voice. But they were saying that there are individuals that do not have an inner voice. And it makes you think, if the narcissist, for instance, has, say they gave up on love and they lose all the fruits of the spirit, and with that, something occurs. Like I said on one of the past videos, if you become reprobate, which means, and a lot of people don't like this because they have a lot of faith in the narcissist, that they're going to get better, but I think we were all there. But if you do not have, I had said that a lot of times, a lot of us have described them as a different species. They're not humanity, because humanity is just not to that level of evil. And we get to see, or we have seen what it's like when an individual doesn't have love. And then you see the demonic faces. With that, you read, I think it's Timothy, and there's Romans and Timothy, which describes this reprobate individual that seared their heart and their mind. God let go of them while they're still alive on the earth, which means he has given them over permanently to the tormentor. Well, so the question is who's the reprobate? And a lot of us that have been with these narcissists for a long, long time, unawoke, and then we got shook awoke through trauma and betrayal. And a lot of us have a relationship with the Lord, and we know these scriptures, or we read scripture. And when you go to these passages and it talks about the reprobate, there is just really nobody that God speaks on that he gives up on. And in humanity, as individuals that follow the word, we feel the same. Hey, if God says that everybody has an opportunity, then everybody has an opportunity. But when you get in a situation with the narcissist, and God speaking in these passages of Timothy and Romans about this seared heart and mind, and what it's describing is literally the narcissist. And so that's where we come to this conclusion. And then you can get these MRIs that have been done in these PET scans, and then they talk about that this like right frontal lobe area is like not lighting up in these individuals that don't feel empathy. And what I have learned is if you do not have empathy, that there is no way for you to find it if you cannot anatomically process it, because you shut it down personally through your actions and your thinking, that over time you have formed new pathways. And then as demonic as they are, that's where we come to that conclusion. But then when you talk about these individuals where they do not have an inner voice. So I guess my point is, if you have individuals out there that do not have an inner voice, they are almost like no spirit. It's just body. It's like when I met my ex, it was like my intuition was telling me she was hollow and soulless, really. But because I was tamping down my intuition because I was brought up that way and I didn't hone my intuition, whatever, I had to think about it in hindsight. And I do remember the feeling and my intuition telling me that. And it was a really creepy, evil feeling. And in a weird way, it was really fast when I had that thought. And then I had experiences where I saw demonic faces and things later. But what these individuals would describe as what they would call archons, or in the Middle East, they would call them jinn, and we in Christianity call them demons, okay? That's my point. I just wanted to go over this real quick because I always say that they are the opposite of humanity. And they're the opposite, the enemy is the opposite of God or the opposite of Christ. So when you get into these Nag Hammadi texts that were found, they would talk about that these creatures were like cyborgs. They were artificial. This is how they are described. That they hate mankind because they envy us. And they envy us because we have the ability to be creative and they don't. And this is what the text says, that they are an inversion of the natural order of things. So what do I always say? The enemy is backwards, upside down, or inside out. That would be an inversion. And then it would say that they were not able to create. So if you were to give them a piece of paper with nothing on it, they couldn't do anything. But we can fold it and build a paper airplane. We can draw on it and create a map or anything, logistics, whatever. But they are described as that if they did get, say, they can take our creativity and they can twist it and adjust it and make it different. And that's just like the narcissist. I mean, literally. They do not have creativity. They could go to school and they could become a CEO of a company learning material, but they can't create anything. It would also talk about them being mind parasites and that they only destroy. Well, they called it, they are all about death. And they called it something like a death cult. That these beings, spirits, whatever, that they cannot create, they cannot be authentic, but they can imitate. And that this inversion thinking is conscious. I always say they're backwards, right? I mean, backwards, upside down, or inside out. This is crazy. And they are creatures of deception. That they are mind parasites is what they're described as. That they are sociopathic is how one person described them. They have no empathy, no conscience, no remorse. And so they can feel as if there's no consequences. That they are liars. They're like pathological liars. That's the opposite of truth. And that they manipulate things by creating illusions. Now, this, in my opinion, and then when you look at evil, and the opposite of evil, if you spell it, the opposite way spells live. So like the inversion of live, or life, to live is evil. And when you get involved with a narcissist, you realize that they are not creating a thing. A lot of times they take what you have and they make it their own. Anything, including a story, anything. Now, like I said, they can be taught logical type stuff, or they can be taught things. But again, they're not creative. They're not creating anything. They're not coming up with anything on their own. And when you have talks with them, it's almost like they have very little to say. And I know that they're always hiding and they're creatures of deception. But with that, man, I think if you took all that away, they'd still have nothing to say. It's almost like they're missing. They have missing pieces. When you get into this no inner voice thing, it makes you wonder, because my point to all that was, when you have if I had no inner voice, right? When you're in the dark, that would be a creepy thing if you're alone, because you're literally all by yourself. It's funny how the narcissist, it's not funny, but it's interesting how the narcissist has to always be around somebody. Now think about it. If you went reprobate, and let's say whatever your inner voice, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work anymore. It becomes obsolete when you give up on love. Because like I said in a few podcasts back, that they're almost a different species. I think I said it on yesterday or today's podcast. Yesterday's. They're literally almost a different species. I've said this often. They just can't be alone. But what you also see with the narcissist, they cannot create anything, but they also are destroyers. And that's what death would be the same as. Death and destruction go together. I mean, if they cannot create a thing, that's why when they come into your life, they just destroy everything just from being in your presence. They destroy your looks, your personality. They destroy your growth in your life. Anything that you're doing in advancement, it falls back and takes the back seat. Anything that's living becomes dead. You go from love and joy to paranoid and anxious, depressed. You're gaining weight. You're unhealthy. Autoimmunes. You're having problems everywhere. You're having money issues. Everything happens when they're with you. And it's just very interesting. And that's why people had to come up with these different titles, because there was a reason for it. Because there's individuals out there that do not have an inner voice. And if you didn't have an inner voice, you would probably want to be around somebody all the time as well. And also, you probably wouldn't be creative. You'd be like all body. I mean, that's weird. And you would also be just a mask, because your spirit would be like outer, and it would be nothing. And you would really, everything that you do, you kind of use your inner voice to measure how well you're doing and what you're doing. Your inner voice keeps you in check, man. It would totally make you aloof. I mean, I don't know what it would be like, but I couldn't ever imagine. It's like you want to be focused on your inner voice all the time now. You can be thinking, make sure it's still there. But this is crazy. And evil is like ignorance, and life, or to live, is truth. And I had heard somebody say one time, on speaking of the spiritual and the physical and us versus the enemy, meaning that they put things out in movies and things, because when they do, that true humanity, we are so creative, y'all, that it gives us ingenuity. It makes us think about how we could take what we just saw and just create stuff with it, or turn it into something amazing. Like create new things from the idea of something else. And the suggestion of this individual was talking about how the CIA and stuff would put things into movies on purpose so that it would spark humanity to come up with new and creative new ideas. And then they would take them. And I thought that was pretty interesting when I'd heard it years ago, but it kind of comes together with this. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. It's just interesting how this all comes together, that you have these people called cardboard cutouts or soulless portals or empty cedars, because they have no inner voice. And they cannot, these archons and jinn and demons alike, when they're described in the Nag Hammadi text, it would be that they're all of these things. They're not creative. They're cyborgs. They're envious of humanity because they cannot create. They're not creative, but we are. They're mind parasites. If you think about a parasite, y'all, a parasite can't love and can't be creative. And that is what the narcissist is known as. A parasite has to steal. Has to. And it has no empathy. And they're against the natural order of things completely. If you can give me a like, subscription, and a thumbs up. Love y'all. Till next time. Peace. We out.